We are now getting the first results from early tournaments in the new format, and we need to talk about the meta. I'm beginning to see a design trend that I am not particularly excited about. It's not really the way that I like to play Pokemon or how I really think Pokemon should feel. I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but this is just my opinion after being a longtime Pokemon fan and a longtime Pokemon TCG player. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about the best decks that have come out of this format, how deck lists are now being built, and what I think we need to do to change it for the future. So let's take a look. This is by far the best performing deck so far, and this kind of sets the scene for what is going on in the format. What we have here is Dialga with Arceus, and when you look at it, I didn't really think this at first when I first saw Arceus. All I thought about was, oh, there are a lot of new cards that can be played with Arceus. That seems to be, you know, the combo that they're trying to push for. But when you look at Arceus, it does very similar things to a card we got in the last set, which is Yanmega EX. The only difference is Arceus does not have to evolve. Its damage output is slightly higher. It can do 130 if you have a full bench. Sure, you have the bench drawback, but when you have this many bulky Pokemon, and it's not as much of a drawback as you would think it is. So it just seems it's just strictly an upgrade from Yanmega EX, which is weird that a basic Pokemon is just better than a stage 1. An already good stage 1 that saw play, it's now just being replaced by a basic Pokemon. And this is sort of what I'm getting into, what I'm not enjoying. So taking a look at the list, all this tries to do is you have very little Pokemon. So you have a bunch of utility. You can use all of these supporter cards that you see here. And then you have these two Shaman as a little bit of support. The one Shaman heals and the one Shaman reduces retreat costs. Like, this deck isn't even playing Leaf, because if you have that Shaman on the bench, you have one retreat on everything, and Dialga's accelerating energy. I've seen other versions of this list that just, instead of the Shamans, they throw a Mew EX in there. So now, if you were worried about Charizard, you don't have to be anymore. But it's a very linear deck. You're not really setting up for anything or setting up really big, cool plays to win you the game. It's kind of just put Dialga in the active spot, charge up an Arceus or another Dialga, and just swing, and play the trainer cards that fall in your hand when they do. It's not very skill-based, it feels, because again, there's not a lot of plays this deck can make. This deck can go Metallic Turbo, and then it can go Heavy Impact or Ultimate Force, and you just choose which one you want to do on that turn. Sure, there's some skill required to know when to attack with what Pokemon and that sort of thing, but other than that, it's not like you're playing a Hitmonlee deck that requires you to set up the damage appropriately and set up for plays later on in the game. There's really nothing like that. It's just attack, play the cards that you have in your hand. So this is the best performing deck list. We're gonna get into some other lists, some other cooler Arceus lists. I think there's better, or there are Arceus lists that actually do seem fun to play that I enjoy, but this is like by far the best deck right now, it seems, at least coming out of the very beginning of this metagame. Maybe things will start to shake it up, but again, this is a super consistent deck. You are playing so few Pokemon that it's very easy to do your game plan every single time, and you can punish decks that aren't as consistent. You know, evolution decks. Evolution decks don't stand that much of a chance when you can be on your third turn swinging for 130 with Arceus, and that's usually enough to just sort of roll over these evolution decks. Think like back when Pikachu was the fast Pokemon that gate kept a lot of these evolution decks from taking off. Well, now we just have Pikachu, but with more HP and a higher damage output. Now we're going to take a look at some of the Arceus decks that do seem fun. They seem fine. I like them being here in the meta. These ones are not performing as well as the one I just showed you, the Dialga and Arceus variant, but they are still very cool to look at. This Infernape list is currently doing very well in the Ursaday Pocket Weekly. Seems to be a... Infernape just now seems to be better because it has... it'll hit Dialga for weakness, and it'll hit the new Leafeon Celebi deck for weakness as well. The problem with Infernape still is the fact that it's a stage 2. It's kind of hard to get set up. But now you have a very good basic fire wall slash attacker with Heatran. He only needs 2 energy to attack. And when you have an Arceus in play, it gets free retreat. So this might be enough to fix Infernape and make it better. A big problem that I always had with Infernape is when I would play the Moltres build, it wasn't fast enough. Moltres isn't a great attacker, and Moltres would just end up being my opponent's key to win in the end of the game, because they would go through, or they would weaken up a Moltres, and by the time like the end of the game comes around, there's that weakened Moltres on the bench. They can just Cyrus it up, and that's game. So it never felt too great to me, the Moltres variant, and I don't think it did to anyone. The deck never really performed all that well. But now with a better basic to stick in the active spot and tank damage and be able to put out damage of its own, seems to be much, much better. So yeah, Infernape's doing well. If you've been waiting to play the card, it seems like best time. You can feast on the Dialgas and the grass stuff that's going around. So very cool. Glad to see Infernape doing good. Now we have the Druddigon Greninja package you're probably sick of seeing. It's Druddigon, Greninja, and Arceus. It just seems like Greninja's role now is to complement whatever the best basic attacker is. I'm not sure that this variant is better than the Darkrai one, but the damage ceiling is much higher for, you know, how much damage can you do in one turn. Arceus can hit for 130. Greninja can ping damage. You can hit for 150 in one turn, and you can complement that with Cyrus, which means you can do 150 anywhere that you want. You can use Greninja to ping a bench Pokemon and then Cyrus it up. Now you're doing 150 to anything. That's very, very scary. So I personally, I love Greninja. I love him very much. I don't love pairing it with Druddigon. I'm kind of tired of the card. I feel bad when I'm using it, and I feel bad playing into it. Just being able to stack Druddigon damage with Rocky Helmet is pretty sickening. I mean, you attack into the Druddigon, you do 40 to yourself is a bit ridiculous. But yeah, this is just a new Greninja variant. Not much more to it. You just slot in the new best basic attacker with Greninja, and there you go. You got a meta deck. So this is the Arceus variant that seemed to be what they were kind of labbing in their mind as this is going to be the Arceus deck we want people to play, and that's Arceus with Crobat and Heatran. I say that because in the trailer that got leaked before we knew anything about this set, we saw this deck being played. Like, this is how they showcased Arceus, and it's doing very well, right? Crobat is disgusting because it can do 30 damage every turn to the active slot. It's just a Greninja that can only go to the active, and because of that, it does 10 more damage. You pair it with Arceus. Now your Arceus can hit for 160 in one turn. You have the Heatran as well. Just a very good basic attacker to leave in the active spot in the beginning of the game. Yeah, just solid all around. I don't mind this. I like when it's a basic Pokemon being supported by a stage 2, and when there's multiple attackers here. When there's multiple attackers, you can it just involves more thought. You know, when should I be attacking with Heatran? When should I be attacking with Arceus? Just the more attacks you have in a deck, the more complex things get, the more options you have. That's what I like about Pokemon. The rest of the list, very standard. They're going for a Giant Cape here instead of Rocky Helmet just to boost the health. Seems like Giant Cape versus Rocky Helmet is a pretty big debate right now because, again, like Arceus has 140 HP. The Giant Cape will take it out of range of other Arceus attacks no matter what variant they're playing usually. Like if this was playing into an Arceus Greninja, well, this Arceus can get one shot in return if it wasn't playing the Capes, but now that it's playing the Capes, you might get an extra attack out of the Arceus. So I personally have liked putting the Giant Capes in my decks. There's not a lot of people that are, you know, playing the damage buffs to get around the Giant Cape. It just lets my big Pokemon enjoy one more turn of attack. So now we have Leafeon Celebi. I showcased this deck on my channel just the other day. This list is actually very, very similar to mine. I'm trying to see what the difference here is. I think they opted for -1 X speed and +1 Sabrina in this list, and that's the only difference from mine. But this is the one that's currently doing the best in the Ursaday. There are two different ways to play this deck. You either run the Irida package, or you go with no Irida, and you go double Sabrina, double Cyrus, and either 2 Rocky Helmet, probably 2 Rocky Helmet because you're trying to be super, super aggressive with that list. Not so much worried on the healing. But this deck is very simple. This is the one sort of... I think I like it for 2 reasons. 1, I'm evolving my Pokemon. And 2, I have energy acceleration and healing and all of that. This feels way more fun to me than just the... what is it? The Arceus Dialga deck. Because there is a bit of... There's a little bit more thought here. You need to know, when should I be playing Irida? When should I be playing Erica? When should I play Irida to only heal like 20 damage off my Leafeon? Because if I don't, then... Because next turn, I'm going to also have to Erica to keep myself out of range from getting one-shot by this next Pokemon that's going to come up. There's just a bit more thought here with this deck. And I like it. I like this way more than the Executor Celebi variant we saw. Because I like knowing where my damage is coming from and how much I'm doing every single turn. Executor just felt... Executor is one of those cards where it's hard to play around because, again, you don't know how much damage your opponent is doing every turn. Are they doing 40 or are they doing 80? A lot of the times when you're playing against Executor, at least how it's felt with me, is I send up a Pokemon and I'm just like, all right, if he flips head, he wins. And it's like turn 2, but that's going to knock out my basic Pokemon, and there's nothing I can do about that. It's just how many heads is this guy going to get on Executor flips? So I like this deck way more. I like playing against this deck way more. Okay, here's a list for the Garchomp believers. And I got to tell you, Garchomp is not really doing great, but this seems to be the better way to play it. And that's really because it's a stage 2 that doesn't immediately win you the game. The stage 2s in this meta need to just outright almost win you the game when you get them set up. Garchomp's only doing 100 damage with Dragon Claw. And then, you know, the damage can be boosted with Lucario, so it could be doing 140. Big whoop. If you get 2 Lucario and a Garchomp setup, you're only doing 140. That's taking out like nothing. That doesn't even take out a Dialga without a cape. It's just not enough. It's not enough. It does have the very cool linear attack. So I would have loved if this deck was a little bit better because the options here are fantastic. You have Garchomp to ping 50 somewhere and then Dragon Claw for the follow-up. You have the fighting support. There's a lot of different tools you can put in this deck, but it just doesn't seem to be enough. I think it's mainly because Garchomp is not doing enough damage. If it did... even maybe 120 base would be enough, but I feel like it'd have to be like 130 base on Dragon Claw for it to really be that great. You know, like S tier or top of A tier. For now, it just seems like a fine deck that's doing okay, but it's not blowing anything out of the water. But if you wanted to play Garchomp, number 1, good for you, because I also pulled 0 Garchomp. This seems to be the best way, so go nuts with it. So now we're here at the end. This isn't a new deck, but I'm going to use this to sort of highlight what I think is going wrong with the game at the moment. This is currently the best performing Palkia. The second best performing Palkia is 2 Palkia, 18 trainers. We aren't even using Manaphy and Vaporeon anymore. We're using 2 basics and 18 trainers, and that's performing better than like the package that they gave us to play Palkia with. This just should not be the case. I don't know what we need to do going further. I think number 1, the next set needs to really focus on giving evolution some sort of consistency boost, because there is no real consistency in this game. The consistency cards you see here are Pokeball and Research, and that's what we have. We have Communication, which can smooth things over sometimes, but again, that's a random effect. It doesn't help all of the time, and it clearly doesn't help enough to make stage 2 primary attackers do well. The best stage 2 decks we're seeing are stage 2s being used as support in addition to these really powerful basic attackers, which even that is okay, and they're doing fine, but I would really love to see some stage 2s that can actually get up there and start attacking and winning games. I don't think that we need to see stage 2s, you know, all be printed like Charizard, where we get a Charizard set up and there we go, we win the game because we're doing 200 damage every turn. But if we could have stage 2s that were important attackers, I mean, obviously we saw Magnezone, and that's like the first really good stage 2 that could be slotted into a lot of decks and actually attacked to help you win the game. But that's really the only one. They overdid it a little bit, obviously, because we saw Magnezone everywhere after that. But no, I think that either what needs to happen is there needs to be See, in the real TCG, what they'll do is they will give you a set and they will print a very obvious synergy between a couple of Pokemon. You'll have, like, here's the main attacker, here's the synergy, the support Pokemon that's going to synergize well with this, and this is sort of the package we want you to use to play this variant. It's what they're doing in this game as well, to a degree, but it seems like just overlooking what their idea is of this package that fits, you know, nice and tight and neatly together and does super well. It's just better to go without that and just play the one attacker and make that your deck. So for the future, I want to see really just evolution support. I feel like we need evolution support to get rid of this. It's not even like we have, you know, the most powerful trainers in the world. Like, we have Cyrus and Sabrina, which are very strong, but Giovanni, it's not like game-breaking. Irida isn't game-breaking in this deck. Misty can be game-breaking, but, you know, it's not like we have the most powerful trainers in the world, and if they just keep printing trainers that give us more options that are very powerful, like, imagine next set, we don't get evolution support, but we get another trainer, like, just as powerful as Cyrus or just as powerful as Research. That's just going to make basic Pokemon be even stronger. It seems like they're focusing more on making trainer cards than they are the actual evolution pieces, or good evolution cards to make those strong. So we need to focus a little bit more on the Pokemon, so you aren't incentivized to just play 2 Pokemon and then a bunch of trainers. Because again, we're not setting up for anything. Like, what are we doing here that is really all that skill intensive? We're attaching to our Pokemon, and then we're playing whatever supporter is in our hand and is correct to play that turn. There's not really a lot of mistakes you can make in that department. Like, it's either going to be, you're either going to want to play Sabrina or you're going to want to play Irida for the turn, and the decision is really not going to be that hard to come up with most of the time. So yeah, that's what I think. I know it's a casual game, but I don't care. It can be casual and slightly competitive and require some skill to do better than your opponent. All right, that's going to be it. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you sub to the channel, like the video. I really appreciate it. I'll see you on the next one.